What's with the bottle?
Shoot the other day about Ingolosi yao. Boom, purely one, but that's something I've never seen before. Okay, right, starts walking. It's following the signs. Yo. Maga figure out since man, they've been waiting for him. It was never about the wings, Mfano. It's the fire in you.
And then outside the court, the EFF started chanting, "Kill the boer, kill the farmer." And then Mlothswa made a speech about setting farms on fire and things like that. And so, again, that's a good example that we regard as hate speech, because you're targeting a section of society. You're saying, kill those people, or you're chanting, kill those people. So there's a message of call, there's a call to action. But
the argument, sorry to disturb you, the argument says it's not an instruction.
Yes.
But it's a song.
Yeah. And I think to an extent that carries weight, and we don't reject that out of hand, because songs, and I think we must have tolerance for art.
This is the Hustler's Corner.
Hello world, squatters and hustlers, welcome to another exciting episode of Virtual Mkhukhu, which exists right here on the Hustlers Corner podcast platform, but we will be on our own platform at some point. So we'd like to encourage you right now, look at the description, you'll see a link to Virtual Mkhukhu, the YouTube channel. Just subscribe so you become a part of the family as the family grows. As usual, family tradition, we go straight to that sharp sign, that like button on the count of 1, 2, 3, let's click it. Click. Thank you very much. Let's go to that subscription button. Click. Don't forget to switch on that notification bell. I do know that sometimes it sounds like near a station, but you have to consistently say these things over and over in every episode, because you never know who might bump into this episode, when, how, or where they're from. So you always have to encourage people so that our community gets to grow. All right, I'm quite excited today because okay, let me just shut up. Let me intro Penuel, because this is a big one for us. Mr. P.
Excess shit, I can't even.
It's okay. The black pen.
I'm so excited, you know, and the guy we're interviewing today, I've been a huge fan of him and the work they've been doing for so many years. I even get bashed on Twitter, which I've been captured and I'm a sellout. I'm really excited about him unpacking his story. And I think for our squatters, and especially black people that are going to be watching this episode, I'm really hoping that they're going to learn a lot.
I'm looking forward to learning or getting a bit of an idea as to how do they make their system work and for their people. Yeah. And I think whether you agree with them or you don't, but you just have to admire what they're doing.
You have to respect,
for their people.
You have to respect
with their movement.
Yeah.
So you'll probably just share with us here how they're doing it.
Yes, we're gonna get the inside secret details of how they operate.
So probably you and I can turn Virtual Mkhukhu into our own Afriforum for black people.
It has to be. I think what's gonna happen here. I know we haven't introduced him officially, but after Mr. Roots leaves here, we must have the blueprint of how we take our squatters. We copy and paste with Afriforum, maybe even collaborate with Afriforum, and then see how we can turn this into something special for our followers and our subscribers.
Ladies and gentlemen, he is the head of policy and action at Afriforum, which is a non-profit civil rights organization in South Africa, which was established back in 2006. The organization was created to call up Afrikaners to participate in public debate and actions outside of the sphere of party politics. Afriforum is not an ordinary organization, but a tool for the Afrikaner nation, and there are a group of members and their descendants to create a better future by executing Afriforum's three-pronged success recipe for hope, which we will ask him more about it. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Ernst Roots.
I feel like we should have been like on Radio Sonder Grense. Goeiemiddag meneer Roots, hoe gaan dit?
Well, dat gaan baie goed, dankie. Thank you for that very gracious and flattering intro. It's great to be here, and I was flattered to have been invited to come on the show. So thank you very much. I'd love to talk to you. And then I'm also definitely up for your suggestion on sharing ideas on how to start and You can call it Afroforum.
Afroforum. Yeah, we've got that. We've stolen it.
We just changed the I into an O. I think the first thing I'd like to, which was I was surprised by,
Sure.
is off camera before the camera started rolling. He was telling us, Ernst, that he checked out our episode with Eusebius Makaiser.
Yes.
I hear you guys have got a history.
Yes, I mean, I know Eusebius, and I actually like Eusebius. He once said to me, I can't remember his words, something like, I think you're a great guy, but I find your views atrocious. He's aggressive in his approach.
Yeah,
he's very aggressive.
He's too smart and sharp, and because he went to a lot of debating competitions, once he get into that debating mode, he goes for the kill. He's a beast.
Yeah. But I think we need that. I think we need to be able to. So someone like me, in who's representing an organization that has views that are sometimes controversial, or I wouldn't think it's controversial, and someone else would think it's controversial. We need to be exposed to the Eusebius Makaisers of the world to put what you're saying under scrutiny. So I mean, we've had some public debates, and I think it's good. So I'm looking forward to engaging with him again.
Let me start. I think the first question I'd like to know about is the birth of Afriforum and what it stands for. And what is Afriforum to people out there who might not know what it is?
Yeah, so Afriforum is part of what we call the Solidarity Movement. It's a network of organizations. And the Solidarity Movement is actually quite old because it's linked to the union, Solidarity, which used to be known as the Mijnwerkersunie in the old days. And I think they're more than 100 years old now. They were founded in, I think, 1912, if I recall. After the Anglo-Boer War, and when a lot of the Afrikaner farmers moved to the cities and they became mine workers, and then they needed some representation in some form of a union to help them. And a funny story in I don't know if you heard that, about if you've read about the mine worker strikes of 1922. It's actually the South African Communist Party started as an Afrikaner movement initially.
Wow.
And they had a slogan. They were protesting for workers' rights, and they had this banner that said, "Workers of the world, unite for a white South Africa." And that was actually a South African Communist Party slogan back in the day. But I'm answering with a bit of a turn now. But so Solidarity, or the Mijnwerkersunie, had quite some trouble after '94. The organization was struggling, and it wasn't in a way it wasn't able to adapt to changing circumstances. And then Flip Buys, who's the chairperson of Afriforum, became the head of Solidarity, and he was sort of the new guy coming in. He was able to change the whole movement around, to rewrite the whole constitution, and make it more inclusive, and so forth. And so it was this union. The Mijnwerkersunie became Solidarity, as we know it today, the trade union. And a trade union, as you would know, is oftentimes involved with issues not only related to labor. So Kusatu would be outspoken about a whole bunch of stuff, political issues as well. And so it was the same with Solidarity. And eventually they found that there's a whole sphere of topics, civil rights issues, that especially Afrikaners felt affected their rights, and it needs to be addressed in some way. And Solidarity became concerned that these things are going to withdraw their attention too much from their core business, which is labor. And so a decision was made back in 2005 that we have to start a new organization that's an affiliate of ours, and that will be Afriforum. And so Kali Kriel, who's our CEO, used to be head of marketing at Solidarity. And so the easy way to explain, people sometimes ask us, what's the difference between Solidarity and Afriforum? The easy, sort of the soundbite answer is that Solidarity focuses on your rights in the workplace, and Afriforum on your rights outside the workplace.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so it's a civil rights movement. It's not party politically aligned. We try to have good relations with all the political parties. Obviously, some are easier than others. And we don't encourage our members to vote for a particular party or not to vote for a particular party. And so we're in that sphere, the outside party politics. So in the broad sense of the word, it's not a problem to call us a political movement. But we don't have any. Sometimes when people say, when are you going to. We have a joke, a running joke. If people say, when are you going to start a political party? We always say our ambitions are much higher than that.
Oh, come on.
Two short,
like
quick
that.
ones. How many members do you have? And number two, you spoke about inclusivity. Can I join Afriforum as a black person?
Yeah, so we have, I think we're we're the biggest civil rights group on the African continent, and
Jeez,
I'm pretty
congrats.
sure, thank you, I'm pretty sure in the southern hemisphere of the world as well, and the reason why I say this is that's just if you count members. So to be a member of Afriforum, you have to make a monthly donation, and you can decide how much, so there's not a fixed number. Some people give 50 Rand, some people give 1,000 Rand a month, but the average is, I think, just below 100 Rand. And we're not a political party in the sense that we don't have a conference where the members decide what the policy of the organization is. Our approach is the other way around, that we're an organization with certain goals and certain policies, and if you support that, you can join. And anyone can join. So we don't even ask race. So obviously we do have black members, but the real honest answer is I don't know how many. I don't know what the percentage is because we don't ask. You can go through the members list and you can read the surnames, and you will find that I think the most, we actually looked that up once, and the most popular surname among Afriforum members is Van der Merwe. But you will also find the Mashlangus and so forth. You will find it there, but we are, so it's just to answer your question, we have, I think, 301,000 members now who contribute to the organization, and we're outspoken on what it is that we want to achieve, and anyone can join.
Wow, congratulations, 300,000.
Yeah.
Crazy. At $100, that's
A lot of people have made that, have tried to make that calculation.
This is why you've got a Ferrari parked outside. Jeez. No, I'm kidding.
I came with my Toyota, if anyone's wondering, but
Yeah, goeiemiddag, meneer Roots. I just want to send a shout out to my Afrikaans teacher, Mevrouw Malan,
oh, wonderful.
who made me fall in love with the language, and obviously because of a background in rugby, I got to love the language, and I got to love the people. Braais, Keiers,
Potjie kos.
Potjie kos,
Yeah.
Cook Sisters.
Yeah.
I was fully entrenched because in Newcastle, where I come from and where I went to school, the choir, the braais, everything was deep inside me. So I loved watching what you guys were doing and building, and also how quick you guys did it. Because a lot of people don't understand, and I think white people have failed to fully explain that Afrikaans is not so much a race, even though, yes, it's from a race, but it's more than that. It's a language, it's a culture, which is why some black people, and I know some personally who are members of Afriforum. So I just want to say congrats as well from my side. One of my favorite interviews of Ernst was actually with Eusebius Mkhukhu and a guy we've had here, Andile Mncitama.
Yeah.
That was an intense one, I
It
think.
was super intense. What fascinated me then, and what fascinated me in another interview, I don't know if it was Parliament, every time emotionally, because our history is very emotional, especially as black people, you've got a representative that looks like he stands for white supremacy and white Afrikaners and maybe even apartheid. So you want to bash him, and Ernst would always just be calm and state facts and state stats and be like, no, this is what we're about. So I think my first question to you is, how do you maintain calm when you get attacked, number one? And number two, what are your personal views around our history of our country and maybe what we should be doing to fix our country moving forward?
Oh, I love that question. So maybe, if I can, given that it's a longer discussion, I'll come with a bit of a segue. There's a quote that I love that we've quoted a few times as Afriforum by Winston Churchill. He said that there's an important difference between public opinion and published opinion.
Jeez.
And what he meant by that is oftentimes what you read in the media is not necessarily a reflection of reality. Yeah. And you get a perception, and social media is even more so. You get a perception by reading about someone or an organization in the media, and then oftentimes that's at least our experience. Oftentimes I would meet people and I'd say, oh, well, I had a bit of a different impression from Twitter or from what I read in the media. And I think usually people tell us that there's, for some reason, there's this impression of Afriforum as being a very aggressive organization. And sometimes, on Twitter and on social media, you poke, not poke fun, but the nature of Twitter is more confrontational.
Yeah,
so that creates maybe a false perception. But so sometimes I get accused, and Afriforum, but I think me in particular as well, of being very bombastic and over-aggressive and so forth. And I really don't know where that comes from, because I don't think of myself as an aggressive person.
Sure.
And a lot of people say to me what you just said, that,
Yeah.
oh, well, how do you keep calm?
Yeah.
And I had 1 or 2 interviews where I felt I lost my cool. So that maybe in terms of the first part of your question. In terms of the second part, I think this is something that we discussed internally and recently, yesterday and last week. So a colleague of mine, Barend Eis, wrote a memo, an internal memo, about Afrikaner history. It's sort of for our management or our leadership. And he makes the point, he focuses on intercultural cooperation at Afriforum. So he works with different communities and joint projects and so forth.
That's beautiful.
And the overarching point of the memo is, and I'm paraphrasing a bit, but it's history is very much like the news, in the sense that there's this question often asked, when is something newsworthy? And oftentimes people say something is newsworthy when there's friction, or when there's different brands clashing, then it's news. And so you read with Afriforum, for example, you will read about Afriforum in the news when we're involved with something controversial.
Yes.
Or when we say something controversial. But you won't read about Afriforum when we're working together with some community. Like just a week ago, we had this big breakthrough, I think one of our biggest breakthroughs yet, but it wasn't, there were some news reports, but very small. We assisted the Princess Gabu from the Seleka Barolong at Tabanchu near Bloemfontein. She's the traditional leader of that community, and she wasn't recognized by government.
Yeah.
And we approached the court, we assisted them to go to court, to have a court battle, to have her recognized as the traditional leader of that community. And we won, or she won, and we were very honored or privileged to support. Yeah, thank you. But so the point of this memo, it's Barend, who's this colleague of mine who was involved, said there that when you think about Afrikaner history, it's very much like the news, and history is you think about conflict. So you think about the battles with the British, you think about the battles during the Great Track and all the wars, and there were many wars and there were many conflicts and there were some really horrible things that happened. You think about apartheid, if you think about Afrikaners. But then he made the point that there's a very rich part of our history that is often denied, or it's just not interesting enough and people don't talk about it. And that's the cooperation side. And we have a long history actually of cooperating with people. So if you go into the Voortrekker Monument, there are these statues all around the Friese, as they call them. And then there's one with, for example, the Battle of Blood River. But there are many others of cooperation. There's with the Voortrekkers cooperation with King Mpandi. We had our ancestors, or my ancestors, had a good relationship with Dini Zulu, and
those are the Zulu kings, Mpandi.
Yeah, exactly. And there are many others. That's not my field of expertise, but the point is that I think even though there were some big battles, and we should talk about that, and there were some atrocious things that happened in the past, and we should talk about that as well, there are also really inspiring stories of communities working together. And I think we don't talk about that enough.
Many people were surprised when the Meyiwa family approached Afriforum for help, for example, with the case that's currently happening, which speaks to the fact that you guys are willing to extend a hand to whoever it may be, even if it's not even a member, so to speak. Yeah,
so that story with Senzo Meyiwa is a tragedy. The fact that and the way I sometimes explain it to people, especially Afrikaans people, is imagine how Afrikaans people would have reacted if Francois Pienaar was murdered 5 years ago, and to this day people don't know, there's no progress.
I think it's now 8 years, no?
It's long. I know it's a couple of years.
I think 2014, if I recall, might have been even that long.
That would be 8 years.
Yeah. So, or Joost van der Westhuizen, or Naas Botha, and
because Senzo was a hero.
Yeah, exactly.
For Ibafan and Orlando Pirates.
So it's really a serious violation of justice, and there's some serious questions about the justice system that we should ask about that case. But that wasn't, the Meyiwa family approaching us wasn't an isolated thing. In fact, if you go to Gerry Nell's office, I don't know the number. I remember at one stage, at the beginning of the private prosecutions unit, I asked him about how many people have approached him or his office for help, and if he has an idea about more or less racial, just demographics
racial
of
breakdown.
yeah. And back then, that was like a few months after it started. He said he would estimate he's been approached by about 200 black people who are asking for assistance. And of course, you can't help everyone.
Yes.
So you have to go into the merits of each case, and sometimes there's not a lot of merit, sometimes there is. And but yeah, and a lot of the stuff that we've been doing, that especially the private prosecutions unit.
Is Gerry under Afriforum? How does it work? So people send money to you guys. You guys assign it to lawyers. Do you have lawyers in-house? How does it work?
So we have we work with civil lawyers and then criminal lawyers. So we have a law firm. No, there is a law firm with which we have a retainer agreement. It's not our law firm. Herter Spies is the name of the law firm, and they do our civil cases, like our stuff about hate speech, or most of the. If you hear Afriforum is in court, it will be with the civil with Herter Spies attorneys. And then there's Advocate Nell's team, which is the private prosecutions unit. So, and we recently also appointed Barry Bateman, the journalist. He's part of that team now. So the private prosecutions unit is part of Afriforum, but it's a bit of a standalone thing. So there's no political interference. We don't go from Afriforum. I don't go to Advocate Nell and say, well, you need to prosecute these people and don't prosecute these people. He would come to us and say, this is who we're going to prosecute.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it's part of Afriforum. It's funded exclusively by Afriforum.
Okay.
But it's in a way a bit to the side of Afriforum.
They almost work independently.
Yeah,
and
so
then they suggest to you guys which cases they're going
they have
after.
a degree of autonomy. And the point there is they must help people who've been let down by the justice system. And cases, particularly, you can't just privately prosecute anyone. You can only privately prosecute when someone was charged and the prosecuting authority have decided not to prosecute. So, and in such cases, we can become involved. And sometimes they refuse to prosecute, but they haven't decided not to prosecute. And then what you can do is you can go to court to force them to do one of two things. Either they must prosecute this person now, or they must give you a certificate that they're not going to prosecute. And in that case, you can do private prosecution. So you take over the role of the prosecuting authority. And that's what Advocate Nell is doing now.
Sure.
3 short ones quickly. Number one, do you agree that apartheid was crimes against humanity? And if the answer is yes, I want to know about your current old apartheid South African flag. I want to know about that case. Yeah. And then number 3, I also would like to hear your opinion on, I think it was, I don't know if it was early this year or it was late last year, when Mr. Julius Malema was in court with one of your legal representatives.
Yeah.
And it was a very, very interesting one. It trended all over social media for almost a week, I think.
Yes. Okay, so those are 3 loaded questions. So the first one, I think the context there is we often get accused of being a pro-apartheid movement, which we aren't. I mean, we definitely aren't, and we've been very outspoken to criticize the apartheid system, to reject the apartheid system. There has been some interviews where I've been involved with, and Kali Kriel, our CEO, has been involved with, where some comments have been taken out of context, which seem to suggest that we are somehow trying to defend apartheid. And one of those cases actually went to court, where the court found that Afriforum has never defended the apartheid system. Afriforum, I think actually Eusebius McKaiser was involved with one of these interviews.
Is it?
But the point of the matter is, yes, I mean, we've never denied that it's obvious it's been declared a crime against humanity. There was a debate at one stage, and a point that Kali Kriel has made once, that at the time when it was implemented, it wasn't a crime against humanity, and then in 1973 it was declared a crime against humanity. So he was making that point, and then it was that was interpreted as denying that it's a crime against humanity. So that's unfortunate, and I think if you are an organization like us and you're involved with discussions on controversial issues, unfortunately things like this will happen where you get misquoted and misrepresented. So no. We don't deny it. We don't deny that. Secondly, on the flag, that's also, we had some discussions about that, the flag case, because we're involved with that case. And what people don't know is we're not involved at our own accord. So what happened there was the Nelson Mandela Foundation brought that case to have the old flag banned or declared to be, the display of the flag declared to be hate speech. And then what they actually did was I don't know if they were just misinformed or if they were malicious, but they added Afriforum as a respondent. So they went to court and then they said Afriforum is going to oppose this because Afriforum is displaying the flag. And that's not true. Afriforum does not display the flag, and we actively, I mean, we're on record. We've been on record many times asking our members not to display the flag. And so we decided that we had to make a decision whether we're going to withdraw from that case or not, and we decided that we're going to stay in, partly to make the point that we're not in favor of the flag, that we don't encourage our members to display the flag, and that we actually encourage our members not to display the flag. I mean, there's been events, Afriforum events, very rarely, I think twice since we were founded, where we would have a meeting and then someone would show up with a flag, and then we would tell that person to put it away. So that's our position on the flag. But we all, however, on the other side of the argument, we do maintain that freedom of speech is very important. We agree that hate speech is real, and hate speech is something that must be combated. And I believe, so the question is then, when is something hate speech and when isn't it? And our position is that if something is offensive, that's not sufficient for it to be hate speech, because a lot of things are offensive to a lot of people. Yes. So our position, and I think the appropriate definition is to say when something is offensive, yes, when it targets people based on their identity, and when there's a call to inflict harm on that community based on their identity, then something is hate speech. So I make a comment, I single out Jewish people or gay people or black people or whatever, a particular section, or Muslims or Christians or whatever, a section of society, and then I make a statement and I say, therefore you need to fire them, or you need to bash them when you see them in the street, or something like that, then it's hate speech. And so our position is displaying a flag could be hate speech, but only displaying it is not sufficient. So if you display the flag and you combine that with a message of hatred or calling on people to discriminate against a section of society, then it's hate speech. But only displaying it is not. And so that's our position in this court case. And so also, and that's not just an opinion, it's something that's been properly researched, is what's the most efficient way to combat hate speech? And going to court is usually not a good way to combat hate speech, which is ironic for me to say, given that we've gone to court.
Because that's all you do.
Yeah, but I'll get to that now. But
yeah.
So the most efficient way to combat hate speech, or not only hate speech, offensive speech, is for influential people within that section of society to take a stance and say this is not acceptable. So, for example, to express it in racial terms, the most efficient way to combat white hate speech is not for the ANC to take the AWB to court, but for other white people to say, listen, this is not acceptable. To call out the people in your own community. And so I think the flag is a good example. If we have a problem with the flag, the appropriate way to deal, or the most efficient way to deal with that is not to make it illegal, but for people in that community to say, listen, we shouldn't display the flag.
And when I looked at the data,
and people have different, there's a debate within the Afrikaner community as to what does that flag really mean? And some people, I grew up in the New South Africa, so I don't regard it as my flag. I don't see the old South African flag as a flag representing Afrikanerdom. To me, it's a political flag. But then there are some people who say, no, we actually fought the Nazis under that flag. We went to in the Second World War, we went to Europe to fight against Hitler with this flag on our shoulders. So there's that argument. It's maybe a fringe argument, but the point is there's nuance. And so that brings me to your third question, which is ironic. I've just said that going to court to combat hate speech is not the most efficient way, but we did take the EFF to court. And the reason why we did is we tried dialogue, and dialogue has failed. And people often don't recognize that we always say that dialogue is the best way to address issues. Sometimes dialogue doesn't work. So yes, we went to court. We took the EFF and Julius Malema and Mbuyiseni and Dlozi to court, particularly for the events at Senekal. So in Senekal, there were those big events. Was it not last year, the year before, 2020, I think? And that was after the murder of Brendan Horner, who was a farm manager. So there was this particularly brutal farm murder, and his body was hanged on a pole, and then he was put out. There was sort of a display was made of the crime scene by the attackers, and then people were caught by the police, and they were charged for a farm murder, for having murdered him. And then outside the court, the EFF started chanting, "Kill the Boer, kill the farmer." And then Mlothswa made a speech about setting farms on fire and things like that. And so, again, that's a good example that we regard as hate speech, because you're targeting a section of society. You're saying, kill those people, or you're chanting, kill those people. So there's a message of call, there's a call to action. But
the argument, sorry to disturb you, the argument says it's not an instruction.
Yes.
But it's a song.
Yeah. And I think to an extent that carries weight, and we don't reject that out of hand, because songs, and I think we must have tolerance for art, obviously, but I'm not so convinced about that argument in this particular case. So the firstly, the question of whether something is hate speech does not depend on what the person says his intention was. The question is, could what that person said objectively be or reasonably be construed to have had a particular meaning, or how is it accepted by society at large? And I think if you go to a scene outside a courtroom where people have been charged for actually murdering a farmer, and you make a speech about how farmers are, and white people and farmers are criminals, and they should be treated as criminals, and we must take their land. If you like that farm, you must occupy it. And you, in your speech, you actually encourage violence or romanticize violence, and then you start singing, "Kill the Boer, kill the farmer." That's a different context than going to a music festival and someone singing like that, or having a theater production. So I think it's different. And still, I also concede that political song is important, but the thing is, you have to consider all the circumstances here. And I'm not convinced that a person attending that political rally, who have listened now for, let's say, 40 to 45 minutes about how white people are criminals and must be treated like criminals, and everything that is wrong with you should be blamed on those people, and then you start chanting, kill them, or kill the Boer, kill the farmer, shoot to kill, and so forth. I'm not convinced that people attending that rally will think, oh, it's only a metaphor. And there's actually a cartoon, I think it was Zapiro, who drew the cartoon back in 2011 with the Dubula Ibunu court case. So there were two people there was a farm murder, someone was murdered, and then the two attackers were running out of the house. And then on the radio, it said, there was the speech bubble that said.
So this is on the cartoon.
Yeah, it's on the cartoon. Yeah, and then the speech bubble says, "Kill the Boer is just a metaphor." And then the one attacker asked the other one, "What's a metaphor?" So I think I think it was him. It might have been another cartoonist, but so I think there's a nuanced discussion to be had. It's not just a, figuratively speaking, a black and white thing. It's something, there's a lot of gray in between that need to be fleshed out.
Jeez, thank you. You know, I worry a lot about the propaganda and the race politics in this country, and I think it's very, very destructive. Since we speak about farms and farm murders, you guys have done a lot for farm murders in this country. And I remember when I started seeing the work you guys were doing, because you did a documentary, and I think it went all the way to Donald Trump, who was the president of America at the time.
Yeah.
And I was quite passionate about what's happening, because we know our farmers grow our food, etc. And when I looked at the data, I don't know which year it was, it looked like 74 farm murders, of which it wasn't clear if all of them were farm owners, and there was no racial breakdown. And at that time I worried, Uti, like, is Afriforum pushing propaganda? Is there really white genocide? Have there been two more heavy questions? Certain data we're not seeing.
Yeah, sure.
What about black? I think I saw recently. The first one is speaking about Donald Trump.
Oh yeah.
At some point, people were like, "Look, not all white racists by some of vote for Donald Trump." White farm owners. No, I just wanted to hear your thoughts on white genocide and that whole thing.
So firstly,
all white racists vote for Donald Trump.
I have lost count. I'm guessing maybe.
Maybe.
Okay, I get it. Yeah. Could be more.
My first
that
question is
we've gone to the press ombudsman or the Broadcasting Complaints Commission to take media outlets
but
on,
maybe
or
all
to
white Afrikaans
charge
racists
them
are
for
part-
contravening
are
the
part
press
of
code,
Afriforum.
for claiming that we
And
are
then the
saying
second
that
one I was
there's a
going to
white
ask you, and this is
genocide
just a
in South
personal
Africa.
opinion.
When in fact
Why do you
we've
think, in your personal
repeatedly
opinion,
said it's
so
not, there's
many
not a
white
white
Afrikaans
genocide?
people don't like it?
and
Like,
to
oh,
say,
propaganda is real. Or racist.
yeah, and we've
I
won
know it's
repeated
tough.
times. There are many. I think if you Google Afriforum apology, something like that, you'll find a bunch of if you Google Afriforum genocide apology, you'll find a bunch of news outlets saying we apologize to Afriforum.
Yeah. But no one cares about that news.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's usually like on page 6 in the bottom. But there's this strange thing in the public discussion that, at least when it comes to farm murders, that if it's not a genocide, we don't need to care about it. And our position has been, genocide is serious. Genocide is what happened in Rwanda and what happened in Nazi Germany. When you round people up, you send them to concentration camps or people just get attacked in the street with machetes and that's genocide. So, and there's a debate about that. There are people who believe that it's a genocide, although it's a small section, very small section within the Afrikaner community who say that. So our position is that it's not. Our position is that it is a unique crime phenomenon. It's unique for 4 reasons. The first is the unique frequency thereof, and I'll say something about that now. The second is the unique levels of brutality, the way the people are tortured.
Yeah.
And we've been accused of saying there's no crimes worse than this. I think it's either the worst or might be the second worst crime phenomenon in South Africa in terms of brutality. If it's second worst, I would say gang-related violence is worse. Because I've read some atrocious stories about people being tortured in South Africa as a result of gang violence. And then the third reason is it's a crime phenomenon that has far-reaching consequences in terms of food security and in terms of employment, because farmers are employers. And then the fourth reason is, just practically speaking, the most important, and it's the least controversial, and that is that farmers live in unique circumstances and they live far away from these unique circumstances surrounding this crime phenomenon. They are far away from their neighbors. They are far away from police stations. There are dirt roads between them and the police, so it's oftentimes difficult to travel. Oftentimes there's problem with cell phone signal and so forth. So just on that alone, that's sufficient to say we need to have some form of a focused counter strategy, because just saying crime is not going to address this unique crime phenomenon. The same way people don't say, if government says we need to stop cash in transit heists, people aren't saying, oh, well, crime is crime. Why are you more concerned about banks than restaurants? Because cash in transit heists is a unique crime phenomenon with unique consequences. The same way, if people say we need to stop rhino poaching, I've never heard someone say, oh, so you don't care about elephants or you don't care about other animals that are poached as well. So it is a unique crime phenomenon. In terms of the numbers, you mentioned that the standard response to our campaign is, well, there are 20,000 murders in South Africa in a year, and a very small fraction of that are farmers. And the answer to that is there are 60 million people in South Africa, of which 20,000 is murdered in a year. If you want to make that comparison, you have to ask the question, how many farmers are there in South Africa and how many farmers are being murdered? So you have to look at it proportionally, and there's a massive debate about that. How do you calculate those numbers? But regardless of what your position is on how to calculate the numbers, basically everyone who's been involved with that discussion agree that proportionally your chances of being murdered if you're a farmer is much higher than if you're a typical farmer. Your chances of being attacked or murdered or even tortured is much higher than if you're a typical person living in a city. And it's supposed to be the other way around. Usually it tends to be more dangerous in cities, in urban areas.
There's congestion, there's high friction. Here you're isolated alone. Why would anyone attack you?
Yeah, exactly. So we're not saying that farm murders is the only problem in South Africa. We're not saying that there are that there's not a problem with township violence or gang-related violence. Obviously, that as well. What we're saying is this is a unique crime phenomenon in the same way that there are many other unique crime phenomena, and therefore this has to be responded to with a unique and a focused counter-strategy. But for some reason, when you talk about farm murders, it becomes very politically incorrect and it becomes controversial, and then the response is usually just to deny that the problem exists or to accuse you of having strange motives, and that's very unfortunate.
I've got two more heavy questions. I think those are the last heavy questions.
Yeah, sure.
This is heavy content for me. The first one is speaking about Donald Trump.
Oh, yeah.
At some point, people were like, look, not all white racists vote for Donald Trump. No? How does it go? I forgot how it goes. But basically, all white racists vote for Donald Trump. Not all Donald Trump voters are racist.
Oh, okay, I
So,
get it. Yeah.
My first question is going to be, is it possible, obviously not all Afrikaans white people are racist, but maybe all white Afrikaans racists are part of Afriforum? And then the second one I was going to ask you, and this is just a personal opinion. Why do you think, in your personal opinion, so many white Afrikaans people don't like black people or are racist to black people? I know it's a tough question. It's just a personal opinion.
So in terms of Trump, I've actually been on record on this, so I might as well just repeat it now. That in 2016, I've publicly said that if I were in America, if I were an American citizen, I would not have voted for him. A lot of people, a lot of Afrikaners, and I'm sure a lot of Afriforum members would have voted for him, although there would be a massive debate among Afriforum members about.
I love Trump, by the way,
Trump.
personally.
I might have voted for him the second time around, but not the first time, because I think some of his, well, there's a big debate to be had about Trump, whether he was a good president or not. So regardless of some of his antiques and mannerisms, some of his policy ideas I thought were better than I expected it would be. And there was a decrease in unemployment and all of that. So I mean, we can go into that, but yeah, I think the fact that Donald Trump said that farm murders is a problem is something that we are really grateful of.
Sure.
That doesn't mean that Afriforum is a bunch of Trump groupies or something like that.
Sure.
He's been not the only one, but one of very few world leaders who have publicly spoken out about this, and for that we are very grateful. So that on the one hand, and then on your second question is, maybe that's the easy answer, but I honestly believe this, that white racism is exaggerated among black people the same way black racism is exaggerated among white people. And what I mean by that is I mean, I'm an Afrikaner. I'm in moving Afrikaner circles. I really rarely find people at a braai who make racist comments about black people. And what I usually encounter is when something like that happens, someone else will say that's not acceptable.
Sure. So white Afrikaans people sometimes call each other out.
All the time. So Kali Kriel, our CEO, had a good example. He was one time in a discussion at some event where someone said something racist, and he said to him, "What do you think is more important, ensuring a sustainable future for your community, or being racist towards black people?" And he said, "No, it's a sustainable future for my community." And he says, "Can't you see that racism is in the way of ensuring a sustainable future for your community?"
Sure.
So if you say ensuring a sustainable community or future is more important, are you not prepared to say, "Listen, I need to reconsider some of these racist views"? And so I do think, and you get that. I mean, there are really a lot of white people, I think, who think that, black people are just ready to start killing the whites or something like that. And that's unfortunate, and that is the impression you get when you go on Twitter. Both, that because Twitter is like a war zone. Yeah. And I mean, I'm on Twitter and I'm active on Twitter, but Twitter is basically just one big war zone. It's incentivized. Someone once made the example, which I think is, or the analysis, which I think is very, very striking, that social media is like road rage. Because when you're in your car, you are sort of protected. And when someone drives in front of you, you can flip that person off, or you can swear at that person, because you're sort of in a bubble.
Yes.
And social media is the same thing. You're on your phone, so there's a barrier between you and that person.
Of course.
And it sort of brings out the worst in you. So in terms of racism, I think there are two ways. There are two ways in which you can measure it. That leads me to conclude that racism, even though it is a problem in South Africa, it's not nearly as big a problem as a lot of people think.
Sure.
The first is you can just walk down the street and interact with people. And I mean, I've been to conferences in Soweto, and one time I had to walk some distance in Soweto. I can't remember what the reason was. And not at one stage did I feel threatened. Not at one stage did I feel that people are, looking at me strangely or that I didn't feel unwelcome. And you can go to a shopping mall, or if you're black, you can go to the Voortrekker Monument, and usually, most of the time, you wouldn't experience people, wanting to attack you or swearing at you or something. So that's one way. Obviously, there are exceptions. The other way to measure it is with opinion surveys, and there's been many opinion surveys. The Institute of Race Relations is one, but there's been other groups like the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation. There's a group called Plus 94, and there are many others who have interviewed people with with scientific surveys and asked them about their views about race and if they have experienced racism and what's it like. And the vast majority of both black people and white people say that they aren't racist, but also that they don't really experience racism on a daily level. They get that if they say yes, they would say, I experience it on social media, or I experience it when I watch television, but they don't experience it through everyday interaction. And that to me is I think a beacon of hope, and it's something that we should all onto, and I think we should emphasize.
Thank you. I think before handing over to Spuda, I just want to say congrats on Soltech. I hope you speak about Soltech, especially as an example of what can be done with funds raised to fix our education system. And also I hope you'll touch on some of the other programs which don't make the media, the programs that Afriforum has. I know you guys cut grass and you solve issues in communities.
Yeah. Okay,
I'd like to know about Afriforum TV a bit later, but for now, you guys took the government to court for vaccine mandates.
Thank you.
So
Thank you
what
for
I
that,
want to
by
know
the way.
what I want to know from you is, do you believe in vaccinations? Are you vaccinated? And then thirdly, your opinion on the, I think it was 1,000 and something side effects document that came from...
It's over 2,000.
Something like that, from the Pfizer documents that are just public knowledge right now. Your opinion on that?
And it just comes back from overseas. Vaccinated.
Well, interesting. I'll tell you something about that now. But so that's probably, to be completely honest with you, probably the most controversial thing yet among Afriforum members. So we've done, every now and then we generally have very good retention among our members. When we lose members, it's almost always either because they die, for whatever reason. We have 30,000 members, so every month some of our members would die. That's just the reality. Or because of immigration, or because they can't afford it anymore. So due to financial reasons. Very rarely do we have people resigning because they are angry with us. But sometimes we would say something, or we would be involved with something controversial like the flag court case. And then some people would say, I don't agree with you, I'm resigning as a result of this. The most resignations we've ever had was because of COVID.
Jeez.
And it's either people saying, we're not hard enough on COVID, we're not hard enough pro-vaccination, or we're not hard enough anti-vaccination. And then people resign on both sides.
Jeez, that's tough.
Yeah, so firstly, I am vaccinated.
Of course, you just come from overseas.
Yeah.
We have to put that on record.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is I was never asked for that. Nowhere, I never had to. I went to the Netherlands and Hungary. I flew directly. No one asked me for a vaccination certificate.
Wow.
Nowhere did I have to wear a mask. And no one asked me, I didn't even have to do a COVID test, not once.
Jeez.
So that's very interesting. I don't want to tell someone...
So you don't have to vaccinate?
I don't want to tell someone who's not vaccinated, you can just go overseas, but that was at least my experience.
Sure.
Maybe they will try to go and then they do get asked, but... So no one asked me about that, which was quite interesting. And then I came back to South Africa and then they asked me. So when I walked into South Africa, the first thing at the airport at OR Tambo was your COVID status and your vaccination certificate and all of that. And then someone made a joke in the queue and said, welcome to South Africa. So that our position at Afriforum is we are in favor of we've encouraged our members to get vaccinated, but we also emphasize emphasize that people should decide for themselves, that no one should be forced to do it, and forcing someone, because something like vaccination is very serious, because it's a medical procedure that you undergo. And if someone says, I don't want to go this medical procedure to force that person to do it is a very serious thing. To force someone to undergo a medical procedure against their will. And so our position was that if people are forced to do it against their will, we will become involved and we'll take a stance against that. But I don't think, as someone who has been vaccinated, I don't think it's safe to say that the vaccine is just one big slam dunk. And if you're vaccinated, I mean, I had COVID after I was vaccinated. There's a debate to be had about the extent to which your COVID is less severe. I'm not an expert on that. So we are pro-vaccination, but we are also very much against enforced vaccination. And I'm hoping that debate is over, especially today. Today is actually the first day that...
So we are mask-free now?
Yeah.
Well, indoors, right?
Yeah, indoors.
You are mask-free indoors.
Indoors, yeah, because we were mask-free outdoors, sure.
Yeah. So let's see. But it's been a very strange few years, in not only in South Africa, in the world with COVID.
Side effects document?
What do you mean?
Yeah.
Well, I'm hesitant to answer, not because I don't want to answer, but because I'm not really an expert on that field. So I haven't read all of these studies that were published. I've read news reports about the studies. And the fascinating thing about this COVID debate is everyone quotes papers. So people would quote papers saying you need to get vaccinated because look at these academic papers. And then the response would be, well, no, look at these academic papers. They're telling us that you shouldn't. So I've heard that there are some side effects. I am more concerned about children. And I think it's a question of risk. I mean, we know with COVID that the older you are, the bigger your risk is. And the younger you are, the smaller your risk is. And then, so I think there's a question about someone who's 60 years old who wants to get vaccinated, to me, is a different question than someone who wants their child to get vaccinated, a child of 4 years old, for example. So yeah, I'm hesitant to answer about the debate because I'm not too much clued up about the details.
But would you vaccinate your 4-year-old kid?
No, I wouldn't vaccinate my children.
Okay.
No.
Afriforum TV?
Yeah, so we're quite excited about that.
Hey.
It's a streaming platform. It's an online streaming platform, and it's very easy to decide to do it, as is probably the case with all businesses and startups. It's quite difficult to get it off the ground. Our model is unique in the sense that it's free. Anyone can watch it. And then you have to ask, what's the catch? Well, the catch is it's funded by Afriforum. What we do, the only thing you need to do to get access to the platform is you have to sign up. And if you sign up, we're going to contact you and ask you to become a member. If you say no, you can just keep watching. So we're not.
So I don't have to be forced. I don't have to be a member to watch.
No. Okay. You don't have to. Anyone can have access. If you join, you're going to get asked to join. If you join Afriforum TV, someone's going to ask you to join Afriforum, and if you say no, it's fine. Currently, so there's a blend of current affairs issues. So I have some shows that I talk about current affairs, for example, that you can watch there, and my colleagues obviously as well. And then interviews and more serious stuff. And then there's just entertainment on there as well. We're getting Afrikaans entertainment from other platforms as well, older stuff, newer stuff that wasn't produced by us. And then we're also making stuff that we're putting on there. And so there's a blend of just plain entertainment that's not politically loaded. There's no messaging involved. And then there's also the more serious stuff.
Afriforum Netflix.
Yeah, it's something like that.
Congrats
it's
to you
something
guys.
like that. Some people have said it's an online cake net. It's not exclusively
online cake net.
Yeah, it's not exclusively Afrikaans. So a lot of the content is Afrikaans, but there's English stuff as well. So yeah, it's very exciting.
I watched a documentary that you guys did with the borders. By the way.
Yeah.
Congrats on that.
Yeah.
And right now, it's one of the topical things. We had Operation Tutula. Aaron Motsoaledi now, the Minister of Home Affairs, is trying to get a bit firmer on illegal immigrants. What is your view on illegal immigrants? What is the work that Afriforum is doing to try and bolster our borders?
Yes, well, I mean, obviously xenophobia is very serious and it's something that we should take very seriously. But part of the discussion is what's happening at the borders. And so this documentary that we published, it's called Borderless. It's a team from Afriforum, the film team with Afriforum TV, went together with our safety team to go to the borders with drones and just to see what's happening. And the short answer is there is no border. There's just a border on a map.
Sure.
But in reality,
There's
it's
nothing.
And it's so open that there are spaza shops on the border. So people crossing the river, when the river's dry, like halfway through the river, you can
should check it out.
You can stop and you can buy energy drinks
You can
there.
buy more fire there.
Yeah.
Facts.
So you can buy energy drinks and you can buy Coca-Cola and whatever, and then sort of carry on crossing the border. And so that's one thing. There's a lot of smuggling happening, especially what we show in the documentary is tobacco smuggling coming in over the border. And so there's basically, and then there's a big crime issue. It's quite serious. So there are people living close to the border whose property, gets trespassed all the time. And we're actually making a second documentary now, a follow-up to go to a different border. So this one was at Beitbridge, the famous border between South Africa and Zimbabwe. But we have other borders as well. And that's, I think, something very serious. I think the South African government obviously should do more. And this, to have a secure border is not to say that we hate the people who are on the other side.
Sure.
It's a basic thing for any country to have borders and to have some form of border control, to have, and people can come into the country, they just have to go through some form of a process so that a country can know who's inside our borders and who isn't.
Sure.
But we don't have that in South Africa. And that part of the problem is it raises skepticism about foreigners. And to be a foreigner doesn't make you a bad person. To come from another country shouldn't say anything about doesn't say anything about your character. But because we have this basically non-existing border and we have a big problem with jobs in South Africa and unemployment in South Africa, there is this skepticism, it seems, about people coming from other countries. And so I think we would have less friction in South Africa about foreigners if we had better border control, and then foreigners could still come in, but there has to be some form of a process.
Sure.
And that unfortunately isn't there.
No, thank you. The programs that you guys have, and then leading into some of the programs that you guys have that people don't know, community work, etc. And then please can you speak about Soltech, and then I want to speak about weapons.
Okay. So
what else does Afriforum do besides take Julius Malema to court?
Yeah, so I've
and
often
fight for flags.
I've often said this. I literally said it this morning, and I said it yesterday as well at the office, and I repeat this all the time, that I actually don't think the work that I'm doing at Afriforum is the most important thing that Afriforum is doing. And when I say I'm doing, I mean I'm involved with the campaigns and things like that. The most important work that Afriforum is doing is community work.
Yeah.
That's the heart of the organization. To understand Afriforum, you have to understand the community work. And so we have, the number fluctuates. We have around 150 branches across the country. And the reason why it fluctuates is whenever a branch is inactive, we close it down. So we don't have, when we say we have 150 branches, we have 150 active branches with an executive that was recently appointed or elected within the community, and they have projects. And that includes stuff like fixing potholes. In your own, it basically the philosophy is don't complain about problems in your community, go and do something about it.
I've seen Christo Visa say the same thing in a book.
Oh, yes.
Theo Fisser or Theo Foster.
Yeah, Theo Foster. Yeah.
He was saying if there's potholes, he said he was speaking to some of his rich friends, and they were like potholes, and he's like, I'm rich, you're rich.
Let's go fix them. Yeah. Exactly. So a lot of Afriforum's membership fees goes to that, and I don't know.
You guys fund the branches to fix those things.
Yeah. And they fund themselves, because if they recruit members in their own community, a lot of that money just stays within their community. So a section of that's our model. A section, if you live in Jenin, where I come from, and you join the Jenin branch in Afriforum, our model is that a section, a percentage of your membership fees goes to the head office, because the head office sort of supports the branches, and we have staff at head office doing a lot of work to support the branches, and then a percentage stays within your branch to do work within your branch. And so I don't know the number. I'm very curious how many potholes have Afriforum filled.
Sure.
It would certainly be within the tens of thousands. It's really a really high number.
I think Herman Mashaba said we have 40,000.
In Gauteng alone.
Gauteng, yeah.
Sure.
Poor Paladze, one of them, was saying, or she was quoting Herman saying, I think there's 40,000
Yeah,
potholes
that
in
might be
Gauteng.
true. Yeah.
Or in Johannesburg. I think it's in Johannesburg. It's crazy.
Yeah, so fixing potholes is one thing. Cleaning up, one of the things that is a big thing in local communities is cemeteries that is usually just neglected. So there's grass this long, and it's very dangerous to go to visit the grave of a loved one. So to go and clean up cemeteries is something we do, our branches do. Cleaning up dumping sites, that's also oftentimes a very dangerous place to go to.
Yes.
Oftentimes because of illegal dumping sites and problems with the existing dumping sites. So that's something we do regularly. And then work, so that's one side of what Afriforum does that a lot of people don't know about.
Sure.
And then the other side is something I mentioned earlier, is what we call intercultural cooperation.
Sure.
And it really is one of our main goals at Afriforum, is to strengthen this. We talk about bonding and bridging as part of our strategy. So when we say bonding, we mean within our own community, we must be able to show to the members of our community that we are on their side and we represent their views. And then so that's bonding, is to say, listen, we represent our community. But bridging says, while we represent our community, we want to build bridges to other communities.
Sure.
And we've had quite a few such formal agreements with traditional communities, and we've done a lot of work. One of the better known cases was a few years ago, the Mkhukhu community, actually at Nkandla, where they were promised a school by government, which was never delivered. And they approached us to say, listen, we need it. So the children, they have to walk every day 20 kilometers to go to school. And they have to go through a river, and then especially with the girls, it's a problem because they have to lift up their skirts to go through the river, and every day, 20 kilometers to the school and 20 kilometers back.
Jeez.
And we helped them. We went to court for them to get a court order to force government to build them a school. So we have to follow up now to see how far that if the school's been built in the meantime. So that's one example. But there are many other examples. We have joint agricultural projects. At Noaga's Post, we have one now where we've already harvested maize. We're planting wheat now. We have a vegetable project with the community of Tabanchu there. Then there's a community in the Eastern Cape, I forgot the name now, where we have an official cooperation agreement for a joint agricultural project, because that's something that Afriforum can contribute. We're not an agricultural organization, but among our members, we have a lot of agricultural expertise. So to get our members to become involved with joint projects, and like planting maize and planting wheat and having a joint project in a community, a local community, a traditional community. So that's one side of it. Another side is recognition for traditional leaders, which seems to be a big problem in South Africa, in especially traditional black communities, to put it bluntly, where they have a very long history of a particular, let's call it a political system or a traditional system, where they have a particular traditional leader, a prince or a princess or a king or something, and that person is not recognized by government. Yeah, so as I said, we recently went to court for one such community. So that's something that we recently decided we have to expand that side of Afriforum. And so there's a saying, I think it was Anton Rupert who said, if you can never, I'm misquoting the tweet, but I'm misquoting the statement.
As Anton Rupert tweeted.
As Anton Rupert tweeted. But basically the point is, as long as your neighbor is hungry, you cannot sustainably be safe. And so the point that he was making is, and I know Rupert's very controversial, because he's sort of the alleged face of white monopoly capital.
Of course he is. He funds Afriforum.
Yeah. I'm still waiting for the check. But the point is, I mean, he said that Anton Rupert, Johan Rupert's father, said that. And the point is that you can have a very prosperous farm, commercial farm in a rural community, and that's great. But if the community around that farm is dying and people are unemployed, there's no food, there's no jobs, then that farm is not sustainable.
Sure.
So that's why building bridges is so important. And I think that's those are the two things about Afriforum that is underestimated the most, is our community work and our bridge building initiatives.
Thank you. And I'm glad you raised this again, because, again, this is not popular news, but I know Johan Rupert has got an NPO he runs in the Western Cape, trying to give a lot of black people title deeds that they never had before. I know he does a lot of charity work.
Yeah.
When he was complaining at some point with Given Mkhari, saying it's not Father Christmas for the nation.
He should be doing more even.
Yeah. You know, I wanted to ask about Soltech as a very inspiring thing that you guys did. And before Soltech, it's not really a question, but I do think kudos to Solidarity for giving birth to Afriforum. I really hope a whole lot more of the black trade unions can follow suit and create their own Afro forums that actually work in the communities, because I also agree that I think civil organizations transcend politics and should be more involved with the people at large.
Yeah.
But my not question per se, but if you can just unpack on the success of Soltech.
Yeah, so Soltech is a great success story. We, as much as I would like to, we can't take all the credit as Afriforum, but it is an initiative of the Solidarity movement, of which Afriforum is part. So I'm not with the management involved. I'm not at any of the former Soltech structures, but I know the people, and I'm on some of the movement's meetings, you know, with the people from Soltech. And what I can say, so Soltech it's been going on for quite some time. It became particularly well known or better known around 2020, because that's when the new campus was finished. The project was finished, and there was two things in the news that week, which was, from a PR perspective, good for Soltech, and that's, so the campus cost 300 million to build, and I'll tell you something about that now. But just before that, there was news that in Gauteng, the Gauteng Department of Education spent 400 million rands to buy sanitizer for schools. So there were two stories now. The department is spending 400 million to buy sanitizer, and this community built a private academic institution for 300 million. So the interesting thing about Soltech is, I'm saying 300 million, and this is not an exaggeration. Firstly, it was built below budget, so they spent less than they intended or they thought they would, and it was finished before schedule, before the deadline.
Congrats.
And here's the interesting thing: is the 300 million, the single biggest donation for that 300 million was 10 rands. So
For what?
10 rands
Was the single
biggest donation that
there isn't a
contributed,
donation bigger than 10 rand.
that funded
to
this
build it.
300 million university.
Wow.
So that was the concept, is people can join this fund that's going to go to developing this institution, and you make a 10 rand donation per month. And from your membership fee, from the Solidarity membership fee, you can choose to have 10 rand go to this. And people could join this fund, this groeifonds, a building fund, by giving 10 rand a month. Now, if you have 10,000 people, I don't know how many people are contributing to the fund, but if you have 10,000 people giving 10 rand a month, it becomes something.
Sure.
And
time.
yeah, and over time you can start servicing debt. You can make R1 million loan and you can pay it off every month.
Sure.
with 10,000 rand or 100,000 or whatever. So that's the great thing. So it's a technical college, you could say. It's not a university, but you can study to become a mechanic or technical
Practical
courses.
skills.
Practical stuff. And again, I think that's something that's also severely underestimated, not only in South Africa, globally. The importance of having, the importance of plumbers and the importance of builders and carpenters and things like that. And that's the type of thing you can study at Soltech. They have 3 requirements to join. Firstly, it's Afrikaans, but it's not Afrikaans exclusive. So that's the medium of instruction. If you ask a question in English, they will answer you in English.
Okay.
If you want to write your exam in English, you can do that.
Geez, I didn't know that.
Yeah, but it's an Afrikaans. It's a private Afrikaans institution.
Sure.
So that's the one thing. The other one is you have to write a test to be exempted, and the other one is you have to pay. So they don't receive 1 cent from government. They haven't received anything from government. So there's no government bursaries. I think there are some programs, different programs to provide bursaries for students to study there.
Sure.
But it's a great success story, and I think the number is something like, it's around 95% of the students who study there get a job afterwards.
That's brilliant.
And something around around 55, almost 60% get a job immediately. When they finish, they immediately get a job.
Yeah.
And then there's a smaller percentage, something around 20% of people who study there who start their own businesses. So it's really a great success story. And I'm hoping that we can duplicate that model
Sure.
across South Africa.
And just to be clear, are you saying that Sinotech is welcoming everybody or just the Afrikaans community?
No, anyone. There's no race criteria. It's
Okay.
not a whites-only institution.
Okay.
There are black students studying there as well.
Okay.
It is an Afrikaans institution, so that's the medium of instruction, and it's partly because there are something like 300 colleges in South Africa, and all of them are English. And some used to be Afrikaans, and then the language policy was changed. So to the best of my knowledge, it's the only Afrikaans college in South Africa, certainly the only Afrikaans technical college. And it was sort of built in response to that new demand because Afrikaans was sort of phased out as a medium of instruction. And a lot of people said, we need some place where you can study these courses in Afrikaans. And the only way to do that was to build your own thing.
Yeah.
But it's certainly not a race thing. It's definitely not that.
No, I get it. A lot of people have been complaining. I'm one of those that still remains very optimistic about the future of our country. And I'd like to hear your opinions on the future of South Africa, number one. Number two, are coalition governments the future of this country?
Okay. I'm both very optimistic and very pessimistic, as I'm sure a lot of people are just pessimistic. I think even the optimists are in some way pessimistic. Let me just say this first. There's a great quote by David Landes that's one of my favorite quotes. He says, the future belongs to the optimists. And then he explains it. He says that there's always reason to be pessimistic. There's always a list of reasons why something won't work. But the problem with the pessimists is they fail because it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So you don't even try because you believe it's going to fail. And therefore, when you try, it fails because you didn't believe in your own project. And he says optimists, oftentimes they fail, but oftentimes it's the optimists, usually it's the optimists who succeed. So what makes me pessimistic is I'm very concerned about the political system in South Africa, not just what's happening in government. Obviously, that's a problem, and there are all these debates about the ANC and who should follow up and all of that. That's one side of the problem. I'm concerned about the political system, and what I'm more concerned about that. And what I mean by that is, even though we have a constitution that is usually described as very liberal, what we have in reality in South Africa is a strong central government. Even though if you read the constitution, you wouldn't think that we'll have a strong central government. I think what we need in South Africa, politically speaking, is more decentralization of power. In other words, less power to the central government, or less decision-making authority for the central government, and more decision-making authority for local governments. Local communities should be able to, for example, if you pay tax, a proportion of your tax money should be able to go to your own community. Not live in Cape Town and then pay taxes that funds people in Messina, or the other way around. So in terms of the system, I'm pessimistic. I don't think it's sustainable. I'm concerned about what economists call the fiscal cliff. And I think in a way we've already reached it. And that effectively means when we reach the fiscal cliff, when 3 items on the budget takes up the entire tax revenue. And the one is paying government employees, the other one is paying social grants, and the other one is servicing debt. And we're actually now at the point where if you add those 3 up, paying government employees, paying social grants, and just servicing debt, that's already 100% of tax revenue. So that's not sustainable. That means you have no money left for anything else. So I'm very concerned about we need to have some form of a program to help the poor, obviously. I'm not denying that. But I'm concerned that the social grant system is incentivizing or disincentivizing creating your own business or getting a job, because if you don't have a job, you get money. So there's a negative side, there's a dark side to social grants. And there's been some studies about the relation between social grants and alcohol. Like, when do people get social grants and when do alcohol sales spike and things like that. So that's not sustainable. We need some way of helping the poor that isn't just giving them money. And the other side of the strong central government problem is regulations that makes it difficult to start a business. And regulations always have a good motivation, but the question is what happens in reality. And oftentimes in South Africa, it's very difficult to start a business just because of the legal framework and all the hurdles you have to go through legally to have a legal business, and everything you have to pay, all the different taxes you have to pay, and so forth. So in terms of that, I'm quite pessimistic. What makes me optimistic is the fact that South Africa is not as gloomy as a lot of people think. We mentioned this earlier. I think race relations is not nearly as bad as a lot of people think it is. That's my observation from within the black community. I can certainly say this about the community I'm in and the conversations I'm having with friends and family and so forth, is that people want to work together. They want to have joint projects. So that makes me optimistic. And I think if we can get to a point where we have a more federal system, you could say, in other words, a central government that doesn't have as much power over everyone, but more local governments, more power to local governments, if we can have slightly less regulation, and if we can have cooperation between different communities, that to me is reason to be optimistic.
A few short fire questions from my side. The first one being, do you think more citizens should have guns to protect themselves from the tyranny of the state? That's one of, I've got a lot actually.
Yeah.
That's one of them. Another one, how do you feel about an independent Western Cape? Another one is, when are white people going to give black people the land back? And then the last one, I'd like you to speak about your band. Because you make music.
You make music?
Yeah. I'm an
okay.
amateur musician. Okay, so
interesting, eh?
Yeah.
I knew I was going to put him on the spot because I want him to speak about it.
Yeah,
Maybe let's start with that one.
Okay, should I start with that one?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think I was telling you, or one of you, just before this we went on air, that I actually wanted to study music when I was in high school. And I went to my dad and I said, I have this plan. I heard there's this college. I didn't know how we're going to fund it, but there's this college in England that there's apparently very good with music, and I want to go. I want to be a professional musician. Sure. And my father said to me, no.
Yeah, I was like near fork.
He basically said that. And I think if I really wanted to do it, and if I was persistent, he would have supported me. So It's not like my dad was not supportive, but he said to me, just think about it for a while.
Sure.
And so I've been playing guitar since high school. I've been playing guitar quite aggressively since high school. So it's a hobby that I'm very serious about, and I like the theoretical side of it. In other words, I like studying music theory, and I like writing songs from a sort of a theory perspective. So you can look at the different musical modes and say, what is the emotion you can get from the Mixolydian mode, for example, or the Phrygian. I like Phrygian and Dorian. It's the different musical scales.
Sure.
And so the Phrygian scale, for example, is more dry. It's almost desert music that you can make from that. And so I'm very interested in that and the roles of different instruments. I don't play orchestral music, although I'm quite interested in that. So that's sort of a hobby of mine. I watch YouTube videos on how to write orchestral music, even though I don't do it. Even though I don't do it, I've done a little bit for the band I'm in. So that's the thing. I'm really interested in music. Primarily, I'm a guitarist. I'm a lead guitarist, so I like playing guitar solos and things like that. And I like practicing scales on the guitar and things like that. So I'm in a band. The band is called Soms Wen die Wolf.
Hey, Soms Wen die Wolf.
Yeah.
So gangster.
Sometimes the wolf wins. And it's sort of satirical. We started only satirical, and then we started doing songs that's a bit more serious. So it's hard rock. I play guitar. I do some vocals, although I'm not the main vocalist. It's long songs. It's very progressive, so it's not mainstream really. And we're not making a career out of it. It's just for fun. So the stuff, there's some music videos on YouTube. There's some, you can get it on Spotify and all the online platforms.
Brilliant.
And we actually recorded an album, our second album, that it's recorded everything. We're just filing the cover artwork, and then we'll probably release it in a month or two. So I'm quite excited about that.
I
But
love
that's
that
just
very much.
that's just my hobby for, you know, taking a break from everyday work and
Sure.
making some music. But it's a lot of fun.
Should
I really enjoy
hook
it.
you up with DJ Mapurisa.
Yes,
And Kabza
definitely.
the Small, featuring Ernst Roots.
Yeah.
Featuring, what's the name of the
Some
band?
songs Vendi Vol.
Yeah.
Oh no, we're in. I'm sure we'll in. So we'll do a collab. Yeah,
No,
yeah,
please,
that's,
please.
That
My
would be
other
very
tougher
interesting.
questions.
Okay, so
When are you illegal foreigners from, when is it, 1652? What's the year?
Jan van der
When are you
Rubens,
guys going back home and giving us the land back?
I think the serious answer to that is, and we've said this a few times, we need to distinguish between restitution and redistribution.
Sure.
And a lot of people talk about these two things as if it's the same thing, and there's a very important difference. So redistribution is to say, at least in the South African context, is to say we need to redistribute land to be racially representative.
Sure.
That's something that we as Afriforum oppose, because your approach cannot just be we have to look at the color of your skin and that will determine if you are a legitimate owner of land or not. Restitution is something else. Restitution is to correct a historic mistake.
Sure.
So it's true. It's not something that you can deny that there were some atrocities in South Africa as far as, you know, many aspects of life, including land ownership. There were black communities that were deprived of their properties. That's true. And there were white landowners who didn't get their lands through ways that you could today describe as legitimate. That's true, and in such cases there has to be restitution. I think it's a mistake to say because there were, let's call it land grabs or land dispossessions in the past, it's because of the fact that a lot of black people were dispossessed by a lot of white people, if I can generalize like that, that means that every person who is white who owns land is sort of somehow
Yes, we
illegitimately.
want your land.
Yeah, and every person who is black who does not have land, that's because he actually had land and that was
Sure.
taken from him. So I think this overgeneralization is problematic.
Sure.
I think we need to support a system of restitution, and we've had that in a way. I think the problem that we are with now is it's not about restitution anymore. It's not about, and restitution is to say, well, where did this happen? Who are the communities who actually had land that was taken
Let's
from them?
isolate it and let's fix that.
Yeah, and
I
then
feel our government has failed to just do just that.
Yeah.
Should have been a slam dunk. Let's isolate this. Either we give it back or we have a discussion. The people will pay a lease.
yeah, and
for
it shouldn't
example.
have. It shouldn't take that long to do
Yeah.
it. It's supposed to be fairly easy. What makes it more tricky or more difficult is, and that's something that Jacob Zuma actually said in one of his State of the Nation addresses, is that the vast majority of beneficiaries say when they are given the option, okay, well, we can give you the land back,
Sure.
or we can give you money to compensate you. Then something like 97% say, just give me the money. I don't want to, I live in Johannesburg, I don't want to farm in rural Limpopo.
Sure.
I'd rather take the money. And if that's what people say, I think that should be respected. But now the government approach to this is to say, well, then we haven't really addressed the historic injustice. And I don't think that's proper reasoning. So I think I asked, and here's a good example. I was at a land summit, and there was a spokesperson from the Department of Land Reform, and he was explaining the land reform projects. And I asked him, I gave him a hypothetical situation, because he was talking about the success of restitution depends on the percentage of land that is owned by black people. And if the percentage of land owned by white people is too high, that's evidence of an injustice. And so I asked him, what's the government position if that was found to have happened? There was a black community, or a black farmer, let's make it, that's actually what I said. There was a black farmer who was chased off his land, and that land is now occupied by a white person. And government corrects that injustice. They restore the injustice, they give that person the land back. And they take that farm from the white person, they chase him off the farm, and they give it to the original owner.
Hey, Mugabe.
Yeah, something like that. And then, but let's say that happens, and let's say it happens through a legitimate process and everything. Now that person is given back the land. Now that person says, well, actually, maybe immediately, maybe after 10 years, that person decides, actually I don't want to be a farmer, so I'm going to sell the land.
Sure.
The land's in the market, the buyer is a white person.
Sure.
So I asked this guy, so what's the department's position on this? Because now the land is owned by a white person again. And then he said, which I think was very alarming, he said in that case, the correction of the injustice has been reversed. So now there's a new injustice.
Jeez, wow.
And I think that's just racist.
Sure.
So there has to be restitution, but this approach that if you are white you cannot own land
Sure.
just because of the fact that you are white is I think it's leading us down a dangerous path.
Thank you. You want us to have guns?
Yes. So I don't know. You might not know about this, but
Because you guys have private security at
yeah.
Afriforum.
yes, yeah. We
communities.
community safety. I didn't mention that earlier, but community safety is also one of our main. We neighborhood watches. When I spoke about community work, that's one of the things we do is neighborhood watches, driving patrols, working with the police.
Sure.
I was in an armed robbery like a week ago.
A week ago from now.
Yeah, maybe
Jeez,
2 weeks
sorry.
ago. Well,
Sorry
no,
about that.
it's slightly more than 2 weeks. It was on the 5th of June.
Okay.
And it was very traumatic, you could say, to our family because there's a story behind that. It was my son's birthday. And it was in the
I
news.
saw that, sorry.
Yeah. And so it was in the news. Well, the story was in the news. So it was his birthday, his 10th birthday. He's 10 years old. And we went to Spur that evening just to we had a birthday party and everything. And sort of spontaneously that afternoon we said, well, let's go to Spur and have because at Spur they sing to you when it's your birthday.
Sure.
And let's go and have ice cream at Spur. And then we were there, we had ice cream, they sang and everything. And I paid, we were packing up, we were walking towards the door. And what I didn't notice is, I saw there were people standing at the door, but what I didn't know is it was an armed robbery. So there was a gang that came in.
So they were robbing the Spur.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
They came in with firearms. One guy took out a gun, and he said actually to the manager, he actually said something along the lines of, look at these, there are innocent people here, don't try to make a scene, I've got a gun, you don't want something to happen to these people, just give me the money, something like that. Then there was an incident, and it might go to court, I don't know, and then people started shooting. And then there was actually a private security guard who was off duty, who had his gun with him.
Sure.
And one person was killed.
Oh, shame, man.
However, it was one of the attackers.
Sure.
But so that was just as the shooting started. This robber who had the gun was killed. What was traumatizing to my family is that happened like 2 meters from me. So his body fell next to the table under which we had to hide. So I was lying there with my 2-year-old in my arms and my 10-year-old boy next to me, next to the dead body.
Oh, your son saw that?
Yeah,
I'm so sorry, man.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
Your
traumatic.
2-year-old daughter.
Yeah, 2-year-old boy.
Oh.
2-year-old boy.
Boy,
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
sorry.
And so I have 4 children actually, and the other 2 also saw that they were a bit farther away, but we had to basically step over the body to get out of Spur. And I thought about that actually as we were lying there under the desks. So there was a shooting, and what we didn't know then is they ran out. And suddenly it was just quiet in the restaurant. And I know a lot of people have experienced this or experienced much worse than. So I'm not saying that my experience is particularly traumatic. A lot of people have experienced much worse in South Africa. And I remember lying there, they ran out, and it was just dead quiet in the restaurant. And we were all just assuming that now they are walking through the restaurant, taking people's stuff.
Sure.
So we just laid there for like 5 minutes. And at that stage, I thought, well, I should have had a gun with me. And then I thought, maybe I shouldn't have a gun. Maybe it's good that I don't have a gun with me. And I think the answer, what I was thinking at that stage is, if you have a gun with you in a circumstance like that, and you take it out and if you join the fight,
Sure.
you have to be properly trained.
Sure.
You have to know what you're doing.
Sure.
And you become a target as well.
Of course.
So I'm there with my kids, and I take out a gun and I start shooting at robbers.
Sure.
Then the robbers are going to shoot back.
Of course.
So I think my conclusion there, and I've read about that and I've thought about that before, but my conclusion in that experience was the worst type of situation to be within that context is to have a gun and not know what to do with it.
Sure.
Not to be trained, not to be prepared to use it.
Sure.
So then you shouldn't have a gun.
Sure.
But I think the best situation to be in that situation is probably to have a gun, but to be properly trained, to know how to use it. So I'm at Afriforum also. We are very much in favor of the fact that people should be able to own firearms, and we're not gun fanatics where we're saying you should just go to Spar and buy a machine gun or buy a flamethrower if you want one. So there should be some form of regulation, and we're for that. We're not extremists in that sense, but people should be able to own guns, and people should be able to defend themselves, and especially in a country like South Africa, where the police themselves and the police commissioner himself has said that the police are not capable to sufficiently keep the people of this country.
Sure. They don't
safe,
even
safe.
have enough vehicles.
Yeah, exactly. So yes, so we are for we are very much in favor of using firearms responsibly, and people should have access to that.
Western Cape?
Independent Cape.
Yeah,
Independent Cape.
so we are working with an organization called Afriforum, which we helped establish, but it's more autonomous, and the position of Afriforum or Cape Forum is more powers to the Western Cape. So we're not secessionists, pushing for a breakup of the country. I know some people are. I don't think some people are pushing for a referendum saying people in the Western Cape should vote. I think if there's a referendum in the Western Cape, I think even though some surveys say the opposite, I think the majority of people would not vote for the Western Cape to break off from the rest of South Africa. Maybe in the future that'll change, but I do think whether that's your end goal or not, I think the proper and the responsible starting position and the responsible position, regardless if it's your starting position or not, should be more authority to local governments. So a provincial government should have a bigger say in terms of policing within that province, public transport within that province. And I think that's a very pressing issue for the Western Cape. And even though I don't live in the Western Cape and I have no intention of moving there, I would think that for the Western Cape, as for the other provinces, it's only reasonable to say that people living in the Western Cape should have a bigger say about what's happening in the Western Cape, as opposed to some Pretoria politician prescribing to them what their system should look like. So we are very much in favor of that, of more autonomy, more federalism.
In closing from my side, I'm not sure what it really means, because I know to be independent, you need to be recognized by the United Nations. Afriforum is now recognized by the UN as something. I'd like to know what that is.
Oh, yes.
And then my last question to you is, are there black civil organizations you guys work with that are similar to Afriforum? Are you guys looking to help certain organizations like that? Or maybe the question is, what is your advice to particularly black people? There can be other groups. Could be Afrikaans people, could be white, English. What is your advice to people that want to build something like an Afriforum? But congrats on the UN thing. I just want to know.
Yeah, so
exactly
the UN
means.
thing was a big thing, and it took more than a decade to achieve. So what it is we're not a member of the United Nations, but we are an NGO that is registered with ECOSOC. ECOSOC is, so the UN has, I think, how many? 6 main branches. That's the General Assembly, which is where the different states meet. The Security Council, I think there's the courts. I can't remember all 6 now. And one of them is ECOSOC. That's the Economic and Social Council. So within ECOSOC, they have an NGO branch where NGOs can register. And what we have, to be more explicit, is what they call special consultative status. So we are recognized as an NGO with special consultative status. And practically what that means is we get invited to UN meetings regularly, and we can choose which of them we want to attend, and then we regularly get the opportunity to give input. So either to write a report that we submit to, let's say, the UN Special Rapporteur on hate speech. They have different, like a minister within the UN, and we can write to them and submit reports. And oftentimes we get the opportunity to do a presentation at some meeting. Why that took so long is because we had quite a bit of a struggle to get recognized. And there's a long story, but I'll give you the short version. Is from the beginning, it's supposed to be simple. You have to comply with the criteria. They check, you apply. They say, okay, you comply with the criteria, so you get the stamp. We recognize you. But in reality, there's a lot of politics involved. And so we had quite some pushback by representatives of the South African government at the UN who were trying to prevent us. They couldn't kick us out because we complied with the criteria, but the method they could use is to keep postponing our application.
Cheers.
And so what happens is you can go and then you have to answer questions to clarify whether you comply with the criteria, which we obviously did. But then they keep asking questions until they run out of time, and they say, "Oh, sorry, we ran out of time. Come back next year."
Jeez.
So that's really what happened. It happened from 2012 up until 2 years ago. So it was almost 10 years.
Congrats nonetheless.
Yeah, and so it was a big breakthrough to us. It doesn't mean that we are, as I said, we're not a member of the UN, but we're an NGO registered at the UN.
Sure.
What we would do, sometimes we would have a particular project, and then someone would get involved and say, "Oh, well, we're going to support or fund this project." But as an organization, we don't get corporate funding. And that's maybe one way to go. I'm not saying don't do that. Our model is small donations from members of our community on a monthly basis. And the model is convince them or ensure them that we are working for them, that we're doing good work.
That you're not corrupt and driving Ferraris.
Yes, exactly.
Sure.
So that's a good example. So and it's a good way of keeping us accountable. So we have skin in the game. We always say we don't work for again, going to party politics. We don't work for the next election. We work for the next generation. And if we mess up, then our members resign. And so we always have to consider what it is that our members are demanding from us, and we have to represent them. But we also need to be leaders in the sense that you don't just ask your members, what do you want us to do, and then you go and do that.
Yeah.
You have to do that, but then there also has to be an element of taking the lead in some way and saying, well, this is the approach we've decided we're going to take.
Sure.
This is why we think it's important, and we would like your support in this. And I think the best example, or one of the best examples in that, is someone like Nelson Mandela, who within the ANC, there were strong positions on certain things, and Mandela came and said, even though that's my party's position, I don't think that's the correct position, and this is why.
Sure.
And there was he wasn't a dictator who just declared, this is what we're going to do, or we're not going to do this. He had internal liaison, and he tried to convince.
It's a form of leadership. It's tough, but someone has to take the bite the bullet.
Yeah, and I think that's important. And with us, as I mentioned, this bonding and preaching strategy is very important. So we're not trying to secure a future for our community at the expense of others, because we know if that's the approach, we're not going to secure a future for our community either. So the only way to do that is to encourage working together.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Ernst.
Jeez, man, what a beautiful one. I've learned quite a lot.
Yo, very educational, but I feel like I was in a lecture. I can't tell you.
I think for me, my take out of our two previous interviews, number one, the McG and Saul interview is they are so focused and intentional about serving their
community,
podcast and chill community. Cheers. When you ask McG and Saul about a lot of the decisions that they take, he says, or they say, for them, the priority is their community.
Yes.
Because they pay their bills.
Boom.
And they keep their lights on because they intentionally serve their community of the podcast and chill.
Sure.
That was quite amazing, something that I took away from that interview, and obviously a couple of other things. What I've taken away from this interview as well is lots of lessons.
Yeah.
But if I have to relate the MacGyver issue from what I've learned from what they're doing is quite similar.
Of course.
Is being intentional about serving your community, and also not asking for exorbitant amounts of money, being transparent, having a team that holds you accountable.
100%.
But then more than anything, I think for me is having been in the NPO space. I've run my education foundation with my team for over 10 years now. Is being transparent and being intentional about doing the good work.
Being a servant.
And always reporting to your people. Let them see the work that you've done.
Sure.
And over the years, that's what we would do, giving out bursaries, getting these kids come on radio, talk about their testimonies and their stories. And I think that is something we are trying to start with the virtual Mkhukhu platform. We have gone to register it as an NPO.
Yes.
And for us, we don't have all of the answers, but we want our community to be involved in helping us grow this platform to, number one, keep our lights on, get the right equipment so we can be able to serve them and bring them all these incredible people with information that is helpful to them. If they think it's helpful, then we want to open up that platform where they can donate from as little as 5 Rand, 10 Rand, 100 Rand, whatever they can afford, but then have some sort of a team of people, or whether it's professionals like accountants or so, that keep us accountable. And then we report to them from month to month as to what do we do with their money, you know?
Exactly.
But it's a non-profit. It doesn't benefit him and I. It benefits the team. Keep the lights on, get good equipment at some point, maybe get some good, not expensive studios, but the bulk of the money goes into doing projects in communities.
It doesn't go to shareholders and things like that. Yes.
And Ferraris.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to get the more fire Ferrari.
So I just want to say thank you, bro.
Thank you for having me. I really
Fire
enjoyed the
documents.
discussion, and it's really a privilege to be here. So thank you.
I'm still going to emphasize, I'm a huge fan of Afriforum, and I really hope from my side more South Africans look to you guys as an example. Because I say this all the time, not all with leaders, you don't always have to follow them. You can just learn some of the things and then copy and paste it into what your community needs. I love the fact that you believe very much in giving power back to the people at community level. I love the fact that you guys are about solutions. You're not waiting for government. You're not waiting for big corporates. It's small donations. And you're like, look, to what you said about the potholes, if it's there and we can do something, let's do it. So thank you very much. And I look forward to us like building a relationship together.
Yeah, sure.
One of the interviews I saw with one of your representatives was asking, when Soltech was built, what if the Zulu kingdom wants to build a Zulu tech?
Yeah.
And the guy was like, look, if they want help from us, we can advise them because it's one of the official languages. We're not saying Afrikaans is the be-all and end-all. If you guys feel your community needs that, we're happy
we'd
to
love
help,
to be
and
involved.
I love that very much.
Yeah, we would love to be involved with a project like that. So,
No, thank
and
you
I'm
very much.
also I'll like to invite you guys. I can arrange for you guys to come to Soltech. I'll speak with the
Hey,
and I can give you the tour and show you the whole thing, and you can speak with the management there and the rector and all of that.
Donkey. Thanks.
We'd appreciate that. We are very big on education. We're big on entrepreneurship as well. But we're staunch believers of people doing it for themselves.
Yes.
Not being reliant on outside forces.
Okay.
And that's what we're also trying to, amplify with this platform.
Okay. Well, excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Let us know if you'd like to have him back. Did we have him? Did we have a beautiful episode, a cruising one? Should we have asked him certain questions that you don't think were covered? Let us know, because we'll have him back in a couple of months' time, maybe around summer, before the end of the year. It'll be nice to do
if
a
he's
part
not running
two.
for government, forum politics.
No, again, our aspirations are higher than that.
Oh, Jeez.
He did say that they're not running for the next election,
Yes.
but they're pushing for the next generation.
Next generation.
I love that
yes,
very much.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, representing Afriforum, Ernst Roots, who's going to be picking up his South African Music Awards very soon.
Boom. Storms will evolve.
We'll see you guys on the next video. Don't forget to click on the link on the description and subscribe to our brand new podcast, Virtual Mkhukhu, with the black pen. See you guys on the next video. Danke san.
This is the Hustler's Corner.